Okay, so for the benefit of the group, I just want to welcome, I see that we have several individuals from the community, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you being a part of the discussion. I think most of you probably heard us sharing a little bit about why the census is important to our communities, but as a region, we are growing quickly. We've grown quickly since 2010 when the last census was conducted. And so there's a variety of reasons why it's very important that our area of the state is well represented in the count. We really want to make sure that we get as close as we can to 100%. And it's a challenge that I hope the community will carry forward with them as well, and encouraging your neighbors and your friends to do the same. So today I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to each of our participants. I want to go ahead and pull up our agenda. I meant to do that. I apologize. And let's see if we can see it. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. And so we're going to go in order here that you see. The purpose of this town hall really is just for us to educate our community about what the census is, answer some common questions related to the census, but also so that our community can hear from some of our elected officials through our region, to really hear from them in regards to why the census is important and important to their community. So each of them will share some remarks with everyone, and then we'll jump into allowing Jerry Kong from the U.S. Census Bureau to share some information about the census very quickly. And then we'll allow for questions and open discussion with all participants at the end. Questions can be placed in the chat box at any time or in the Q&A box, and we will respond, or you can also raise your hand, and then we will make sure to give you an opportunity to ask your question verbally. So first, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Councilmember Tim Sheridan from the City of Lake Elsinore, so he can share a little bit with you about the first area of importance for us, which is the constitutionality of the census.
Thank you, Ms. Daly, and hello to my colleagues on the call and to the residents who are listening in and watching tonight. As Ms. Daly noted, the basis for the census is the U.S. Constitution. As a matter of fact, it's outlined in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. And in that article, it makes note that a census is supposed to occur every 10 years. The first one was in 1790, and every 10 years since then, the government has made a count. And the count is so important for various reasons that I'm sure my colleagues are going to get into here on the call. But one of the most important reasons for the count is, as you know, we have a bicameral legislative system in this country. We have two houses of legislative body. We have the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate, of course, every state gets the same amount of votes, 2 votes. And in the House of Representatives, number of votes, number of members is based on the census. Here in California, we have 53 House members, in part because we're the largest state in the country. And so it's important that people participate so that we make sure that we get the number of House members that we're entitled to that will vote for us back in Washington. Additionally, the census is used to help determine what kind of funding is granted to communities, states, counties, communities across the country, and federal grants, federal funds, and support, money support is based on the number of people that we have. I took a look today at census.gov, which has a lot of good information about the census. And it turns out that it's important that we count as many people as possible because there's about $675 billion, according to the website census.gov, per year in federal funds spent on schools, hospitals, roads, public works, and other vital programs. And we will only get our fair share if people complete their census forms. So we're urging folks to do that. Finally, let me make note of one thing that I've heard from my constituents in Lake Elsinore, and they're concerned about the confidentiality of the census. And it turns out that the census is completely confidential. And while the records will be released at some point, they won't be released for 72 years. So if you fill out a census form this year in 2020, your information will only be released in 2092. And it's very unlikely that you or I or anyone on this call is going to be around in 2092. And of course, that type of information is interesting for people who like to do genealogy, and historians like to use it, researchers. So that's another reason to fill out your census form. You may have an ancestor down the road who wants to know where you lived and some of the other things that are important about you today in 2092. So fill out your census. Let me just make note of one more thing. The president did issue a directive today regarding the census, and today we're taping this on the 21st of July, and you can go online and check that out. So with that, I say thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions that people have.
Thank you so much, Tim. We appreciate the comments. Next, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bridget Moore. Bridget is the Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Lake Elsinore, and I'll let her share a little bit more about herself. For some reason, the slide's not changing, so okay. Bear with me. Oh, there we go, too far. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm Bridget Moore with Mayor Pro Tem at the City of Wildomar. The 2020 census is very important to the Wildomar residents, and we're hoping to encourage everyone to please fill out your census form. In the last two censuses that we've had, we've been undercounted, and the residents are not being counted, which means we are not receiving the funding that we need to receive. Wildomar is only 12 years old, so we're still a new city. When we incorporated back in 2008, the homeless issue wasn't an issue. That wasn't something that was on our line item budget. But fast forward to now, and it is an issue, and how the census plays an important part in that, because we want to receive services, we want to receive funding, and we need you to fill out your census form so we can receive that funding, so that we can help our individuals and our families that are experiencing homelessness right here in Wildomar. So please, please fill out your census form. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you for joining us. Next, we have Jordan Ehrenkrantz. I always have a hard time with your last name, Jordan. I apologize.
Oh,
but
yeah,
Jordan,
that was perfect.
And Jordan is the mayor for the City of Canyon Lake, and he's been out and representing the city for quite some time. So thank you, Jordan, for being here, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to participate. You know, the census is important to every resident in Canyon Lake, but not just Canyon Lake, every resident in the whole entire community that we live in. And I certainly encourage everybody to fill out their forms if they haven't. And if there's some reason that you can't do it online, and I know that's troublesome for some people, you can phone it in and call in your answers, and they're glad to take that. And there's a number that we'll give you in a little while. Some of the things have already been covered by Mr. Sheridan from Lake Elsinore, but just in case people were wondering, you know, your answers are protected by the Title 13 of the U.S. Code, which is entirely dedicated to the census. And the 2020 census is strictly confidential and required by law. The results of these censuses are reported only in the statistical format. The U.S. Census Bureau never shares responses of any census with law enforcement or any other government agency, federal, state, or local. And all Census Bureau employees swear a lifetime oath to protect respondent information. You should have received in the mail your form to fill out. As I say, once again, if you haven't, there's still time for this, and we urge everybody to please, please fill this out. And if you can't do it online, you might want to take down this phone number, which is area code 330-2020. And they can take care of any questions. And it's only probably take you 15 or 20 minutes to fill it out. So with that, if there's any questions, hopefully I can answer them later on, but it looks like so far the panel's covered everything and we're in for a lot more good information coming up. So thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Jordan. And I think it's always good to share the confidentiality message a few times. I think that's definitely one of the major challenges or questions people have, is whether this information is being shared. So
Correct.
thanks for joining us. Next, we have Mark Dennis from the Lake Elsinore Unified School District. Mark is the coordinator of community and media relations. And so Mark is going to share with us just a little bit about what the census means to our education system, to our schools, and how completing the census can ensure that we have and get all the services we need for our youth. So Mark.
Thank you. Well, as the school guy, I'm going to use my minutes as a teachable moment. We're all spending an awful lot of time at home. I want to flash back to a little time in 1968 when I was in grade 6. And I happened to see my mom and dad around the kitchen table where a lot of family business took place. And they were filling out their census. And that's the earliest recollection I can personally bring up about what the census was. And what was memorable about that was they shared it with me. Now, I don't know that I wanted to be a partner in filling out the census back then. I was in 6th grade. I probably had other things I wanted to do. But they made a point to include me in the package. And as much as I may never know then what they were filling out, we had just brought a new baby into the world. So we had just added a number to our family in 1968. And those are the kinds of memories that I can tell you I would like all of our students to at least be able to attach to a census in their lifetime. So here we are at home. Now you're getting digital forms to submit. You're seeing postcard reminders. If you haven't already completed the census, this is a wonderful opportunity to really discuss all of the points that have been raised and to discuss a little bit about curiosity. Aren't we a little curious about who we are as a community, as a school community, then as a city community and a broader county community? And one of the best ways we can get to know that is to, one, be counted and know that we are important to these local communities, and then to learn as we see and appreciate more about the relationship between the services we provide. And I'll tell you, I've done a lot of reading about the disconnection between the schools and our families of need because of the many services that schools provide using revenue that's channeled through the district for food and nutrition programs, for wellness screenings, for placement in various programs of need, for foster youth services and English language learner support, which is who we are. We're made up of a lot of contributing citizens, but we also have a lot of need. And the census helps bring that resource into our community, and we become a distributor and a connector that way. So I'll just wrap up by just saying that it's a great way to actually start a conversation on a topic that might not elicit excitement from everyone around the table, but you might be interested in learning what numbers tell us. We don't just have to be talking about COVID numbers. Let's talk about census numbers and other things that are fun numbers to be discussing. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mark. Very informative. I loved the personal story. I was trying to remember if I could remember my parents doing it. I don't think I can, but I do remember 10 years ago doing it. I do remember that. One thing that I'll share related to what Mark was telling you is I served on the attendance boundary committee for the school district at one time, and that was an extremely informative process. And I know that the district used some very, very cool, I'm going to use a sophisticated word there, but very cool programs to actually predict how many youth are going to be in each neighborhood. And so I think a lot of the community may not understand all the effort and work that goes into trying to predict where we need schools, how many schools we need, and you know, whether a school is going to be overloaded and how they actually draw the boundaries. And I know the census doesn't necessarily purely play into that, but it goes back to this idea of needing to know where people live and understanding how many people we have in our community so that we can best project what services we need to continue to aim to provide. Because as Mark knows, as he's working on a school right now, they're working on a school here in Lake Elsinore, it's a lot of work. It doesn't happen quickly. So we need to be prepared for our future, and that requires us understanding how many people we have in our communities and what those services are that they need. So thank you, Mark, for being here and for sharing your comments today. Next, we have Kelly Noss, and she is the chairwoman for the Temescal Valley Municipal Advisory Council. And for those that are on the call or on the Zoom right now, if you're not aware, municipal advisory councils represent county areas that surround a lot of our communities, and they are the representatives that help serve those portions of our communities. So Kelly's going to share her perspective a little bit from being in the unincorporated, as they like to say, part of our county, and what it means to, as Tim kind of mentioned, how important it is in determining what kind of funding allocation our communities receive and why that is important as we move forward into the future. Sorry, I lost my slide there. So Kelly, I'll give it over to you.
Well, good evening. My name is Kelly Noss. I am the chairwoman for the 2020-21 term for the Temescal Valley Advisory Council under Supervisor Kevin Jeffries. Participation in the census has a real fiscal impact on unincorporated areas such as Temescal Valley and in other parts of the corridor. We've seen a number of new residential projects, as we are all aware, break ground that have been on the books for a long period of time. By counting every resident, including our new residents, we have the ability to bring federal and state funding to programs that use that data to understand how the population has changed and to ensure that that funding continues to support that changing population. For example, more than $600 billion federal dollars are spent annually on programs across the country, including transportation. Transportation programs that are funded include maintenance, constructions of roads, highways, bridges, and more. Grants for public transportation programs, including public busing, which we don't have the benefit of in unincorporated areas of having city buses, are funded through those programs. Multiple projects on the I-15 and within the I-15 corridor have been funded utilizing census data within the last few years and hopefully moving forward. Census data also helps communities respond to and prepare for natural disasters. The Census Bureau produces timely local data that is critical for emergency planning, preparedness, and recovering efforts for all types of emergencies. As we know in Temescal Valley and our surrounding unincorporated areas, over the last few years, we've had our own handful of natural emergencies. And that data has important value in preparedness and in active response, including evacuations and making sure perhaps our more senior population is addressed and able to receive the services they need. It also goes into the recovery efforts because remember that disaster is such a short-term process. It's really the recovery that stretches out for years. The data also helps support funding for needs for such as fire departments and hospital services. The census data also supports federal funding for programs that most people don't think about, including community development block grants, medical assistance programs, disabled veterans outreach, Pell grants for college, wildlife restoration, which is a huge part of it out here in Temescal Valley. We have gorgeous open space that we love to conserve, AmeriCorps, and so many other programs. But with all that said, the original purpose of the census was to ensure accurate representation in the House of Representatives, and this still serves in that role. States gain or lose seats in Congress, and in turn, the Electoral College, if you guys forgot, it's an election year, depending on how much their population changes relative to the rest of the nation. Losing seats by not receiving accurate data has consequences. The data also drives the drawing of district maps for congressional districts, districts for assembly and state Senate legislation, our Riverside supervisor districts, city council districts, and school district trustees. Some of the biggest impacts on our day-to-day lives are driven by local decision makers. So it is so vital that those maps are accurate to represent our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. That was great information. I think the funding part for me as a city employee, I'll say, is one of the most important because I think Bridget mentioned homeless efforts, for example, and just our population data can affect how much money we get for those grants. Some of them, and I think you mentioned COVID-19 or just the idea of emergencies, that population data also impacts how much money we get in our recovery for that. So people may not realize, but oftentimes if you're voting for a proposition, for example, and that money is allocated towards, let's say, water projects, that funding is not just handed over to the cities. We oftentimes have to apply for the grants, and then there's allocations sometimes based on population. So it's very, very important for our communities to ensure that we can keep getting the funding and the services we need, that we have a complete count. I also like how you mentioned transportation, because in Lake Elsinore we have 6 interchanges. Well, eventually we'll have 6, and we have 1 underway right now. So we still have 5 more to be funded. And I think that's something that all of our communities desperately need. And we know that our highways are unable to serve the existing population, let alone what's to come. So it's very, very important for our whole region that we get the funding that we need for our roadways. And lastly, I'll just mention on the districts, again, because most of our cities, we're just barely into districts. And so most of us drew boundaries based on the 2010 census. So right now, your elected representatives are based on old data. And so those boundaries will be redrawn after this new data is available. So about 2022, you'll see that most of our communities will go through that process, and your district will change, and that will affect your elected representation locally. So thank you, Kelly. Next, we have Michelle, and Michelle Lindsey is from the Lake Elsinore Valley Chamber of Commerce, and she is the Director of Marketing. So we're grateful to have Michelle joining us. Michelle's going to talk about the business side, which also is an interesting component that I think a lot of times our community doesn't recognize. And we just recently did a post on social media and said, you want a Trader Joe's or you want the Hobby Lobby. That was the other one we use. And oftentimes as communities, we hear all these great ideas and we would love to welcome them to our communities, but they always go back to the data. And part of that is the census data. So Michelle, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our town hall tonight. I hope everyone is doing well. Like Nicole said, my name is Michelle Lindsey, and I represent the Lake Elsinore Valley Chamber of Commerce. I've been with the Chamber for almost 12 years now, going on 13, as their Director of Marketing, and since I have been here, the City of Lake Elsinore's business community has grown so much, and we still have a long way to go. With that being said, our economic development for the next 10 years will be impacted by the results of the 2020 census. An undercount or underrepresentation will affect our market for up to 10 years. Approximately 100,000 stores are open every year in the United States. We want to ensure that Lake Elsinore, everyone else, gets their fair share. Census data provides important demographic data for investors in small and large businesses to invest in economic development. Some of the data the census provides are income levels, age of residents under 6 or 65 and older, languages that are spoken in the home, home ownership versus rentals, household size, age of home, occupational, education attainment, community patterns. An example for this, Census 2020 will determine whether businesses are needed to provide for daycare or senior care in our community. We just need all of us to remember that every resident counts. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We appreciate those comments. Again, I think it's so important. This is one of the conversations I often have with my friends, is recognizing that this data is not just for cities and for funding. It is also being used by the private sector. And that is such an important part of us attracting the businesses that our community wants and needs. So we're hopeful, again, that by having a more sufficient count, that'll help bring in more investment. You have to remember, a lot of corporations, large and even small, across the nation, they may not even know where Lake Elsinore is or Riverside County or have any idea what is out here. And so they will sometimes just start with data, and they will just look for those emerging markets, the places that hit their targets. And so this is one of those pieces to that puzzle and trying to attract new and different businesses to our community and new investors, which is super important. Next we have, I think it's Jerry, but It is. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jerry. I don't know if we're missing a slide there, but I think it just jumps into our response rate.
Yep.
Okay. All yours.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Kong. I'm your local partnership specialist with the United States Census Bureau. I'm sure that the city of Canyon Lake, Wildomar, Lake Elsinore are very familiar with the maps and operational updates that I've been giving each of these cities. So I'm going to show you what the city of Lake Elsinore looks like in terms of its current response rate, 63.5. You're beating the United States, California, and county average, so great job. If we can move to the next slide, please. The city of Wildomar is doing a little bit better at 65.6, and the city of Canyon Lake is doing a little bit better at 65.8%. But you know what? It's really funny. If you go to the next slide, the unincorporated community of Temescal Valley is beating everyone right now. They're putting all the cities to shame in their unincorporated glory. So you have one census tract that is doing 74.6. That's where we want all the rest of the census tracts all across, Temescal Valley, Lake Elsinore, Wildomar, Canyon Lake. We want you to be doing as well as that. The reason why we want you to be doing as well as that is if you go to the next slide, this is what the census looks like. If you go online to my2020census.gov, it will take you to this page and you just click that button, start questionnaire. It's super easy. I think I did my census in less than 10 minutes. It's super easy. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you verbatim what some of the questions look like. So nothing is too personal. And if you do feel that any one question or two questions are too personal, you should feel free to leave them blank. But here's what they ask. It's nothing too big, nothing too major. We are just asking for demographic data for yourself. And a reminder to everyone that financial or social security information will never be asked on the 2020 census. The other Census Bureau surveys sometimes will ask for demographic data related to finances, but not the 2020 census. So there's a big difference between all of the different surveys that the Census Bureau does on behalf of other government agencies. But the 2020 census, these are the questions that are going to be asked. Next slide, please. So these are the common questions for the census. I know that Nicole was very particular and detailed about the common questions that she receives at the city. I know that a lot of other cities have received these questions as well. How do you correct a mistake once you've already completed it online? You just take the census over again. That's all you have to do, right? And so the Census Bureau has a set procedure in place to weed out duplicates, so you don't have to worry about doing it over again if there was one mistake. And what do I do if I can't find my census ID? So Nicole will attest to you in all of the postcards that she received, there are a census ID that's included in those postcards. If you do not have your census ID or if you've misplaced it, you just go to my2020census.gov and just start the census. The only difference will be is inputting your address, and that's the only difference. And if you're unable to respond online, there is that phone number off to the right side right there. The next slide, please. So obviously the pandemic response has changed our operational timeline. We were originally scheduled to be all done by July 31st, but because of the pandemic response, our timeline extends all the way to October 31st. And one of the reasons why I wanted to let everyone know to please fill your census online is you'll notice on the bottom there, non-response follow-up. What that means is that if you do not fill out your census, someone will a federal official, a Census Bureau enumerator will come knocking on your door to ask for this information. The Census Bureau takes this very seriously. We will come to your house multiple times if necessary. And, if you do not answer, I understand how much we hate anyone coming to our doors for any reason, but if you are going to answer the door for anyone, please do it for the census. It does help your community. And please keep this in mind. If you do not answer your door the multiple times that the census comes by, we will be knocking on the doors of your neighbors. So if you want to spare your neighbors that grief, please fill it out online, or when that census staff comes to your door, please answer these questions. We would appreciate it so much. One of the things that I wanted to lastly say You know, I believe that Mayor Pro Tem Moore talked about it in terms of the undercount. You know, the estimated undercount in the 2010 census was 280,000 Californians. What that meant is that California lost out on $560 million that should have been ours every year for the past 10 years. So that's close to $6 billion that California missed out on just because people didn't fill out their census. And we want to make sure that California receives its fair share of federal funding. And if we go to the next slide, please. The census is still hiring. Please, if you know someone that needs a job, pay is competitive. You'll be, a lot of the times working from home, you'll get excellent reimbursements. Please let us know. Please let others know too that the Census Bureau is still hiring. And this is the last slide. This is my contact information. If you have any questions about the census, you should feel free to give me a call or email me anytime. Below is the contact information for my team lead, Omar Becerra. You should feel free to contact him at any time as well. So if we can answer or, you know, allay any of the concerns that you may have about the census. You know, I'm a broken record when it comes to the confidentiality of the census. I'll be the third person to discuss this, you know, in this presentation. The Census Bureau takes confidentiality very seriously for historical reasons too. And so none of your information will ever be shared with law enforcement or any other government agency. And so we just want you to feel safe with answering the census. Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. So I'll just show everybody. I've been testing out to make sure if I get all of the postcards they tell you you're going to get by not completing my census. I was sharing that with some of the group ahead of time. So, you know, definitely I think our community is well aware that they are being asked to complete the census. I think all of us would agree, and we're all available, most of us on social media, to help answer any questions or to try to ease any concerns you may have related to the census. So whatever it is that maybe is holding you back from completing the census, that may be causing you to struggle with whether to complete it or not, or maybe it's just because you keep forgetting. I think most of us here will even probably send you a reminder message on Facebook if you want, just to make sure that you help do your part to ensure our communities get the fair funding that we need, an accurate representation. And we were kind of sharing at the beginning of this meeting, some of the folks may have been already on the meeting, but we were sharing that stay tuned because we're going to issue a challenge of some sort amongst our communities to try to engage our residents to complete the census over a day's time. And we will see by those percentages that Jerry showed you, we can see by day what kind of impact that will have. So stay tuned. We'd love anyone's support in sharing that and participating in the challenge. I'm not really sure how Temescal Valley has such high percentages compared to all of our regions. So that's making me eager to find out more, because I think that we would hopefully see very soon those numbers even climb higher, because I know most people do not want people knocking on their doors. And my neighbors probably don't want more people knocking on their doors if they've already completed their census. So it's important that we also remember that that takes resources and time and commitment from our government. And so let's help try to prevent that cost and save a little bit of effort there if we can. Now I think we only have a few, I know, attendees on the call right now. And for those that watch this later, we would encourage you to submit your comments and questions on our social media posts, and we'll be happy to answer them. But yeah, I'd like to see if there's anyone on the call or on the meeting right now that has any questions that they'd like to ask. You're more than welcome to raise your hand. And if I know how to do that, I'll be able to let you speak. And then we also have a chat box as well as a question and answer platform. So let's see, I think there was Tracy Davis said, yes, I have been sharing to Temescal Valley every other week. So there we go. Maybe Tracy's the secret weapon. Tracy, you can help us out if you want to share for all our communities. We need more of you out there. And Bridget said, good job. So if there's any other questions, I'm kind of watching and I'll monitor, but while we're doing that, I want to open it back up to the whole group of participants. I know there's some individuals that I didn't have introduced at the beginning. I had initially intended to do that, but I thought it was important we kind of jumped in to the primary purpose of the meeting. So if there's anyone that wants to share anything, our panelists, some of the city staff or the elected officials, you're more than welcome to jump in now and share anything else you may have for the group.
This is Jordan Ehrenkrantz, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Jordan.
Well, in these troubled times of high unemployment and people struggling quite a bit and not being able to perhaps make their own schedule, this census job looked like a great opportunity. And then as long as they're still hiring and the pay is rather exceptional, I would encourage anybody that's looking for a job to apply for this. It's not a thankless job. It's a very thankful job when it's all done. So here's an opportunity for somebody to get a job that perhaps hasn't been able to at this particular time.
Great point, Jordan. I mean, I've actually thought about doing it myself because I just thought it's good exercise too. So I could walk door to door and engage with my community and hear a little bit more from them as well. So I agree with you. It's not a thankless job. It's definitely an important job. And I think it'd be a little bit of fun. Maybe not the doors not being answered or slammed in my face, but you know, the other part of it would be fun to be a part of.
Nicole, I have a little story. So since Wildomar, you know, we're so young, this actually is only our second census. So the first census was 2010. I happened to be mayor that year. And so it was April 1st, 2010 was Census Day. And in Lynn Valley Hospital, we had the first baby born be the census baby. And I got to go down with our rep. I don't remember his name right now, but we went down, we had a onesie and it said census baby on it. And we presented them, I think even with a scholarship. We gave the parents some things. So for Kimberly, I think we need to find that census baby and bring her back out this year. It was a little baby girl. So now, unfortunately now, they don't have babies born at our hospital anymore. They moved it over to Rancho. So that's even doubly important that she was born there.
That is great. I love that story. So they didn't do that this year because it wasn't out in Wildomar. That's too bad. It'd be kind of interesting to even try to find from Marietta, maybe the Marietta hospitals, I should say, who the census babies were. The first one born or something would be kind of interesting. Yeah, that's a great idea. I like that. I think that one of the things that I lost my train of thought, so I apologize. But one of the things that I was going to say is when you mentioned the Census Day, and I think that's something that Jerry, not many of us covered, but I think it's important to mention now that you brought it up. Oftentimes, I think people get confused or they may not know, like, okay, I'm completing the census on July 30th, and Census Day was, you know, April 1st. So what does that mean? And for the community, it's important to recognize that Census Day means that as of that day, who was living in your house. And I think that's super important to mention. This year with COVID-19, some teenagers have come back home. Some people have moved back into other houses. So just remember when you're completing your census, if you can remember who lived in your home on April 1st, that it's as of that day. And that's intended to just make sure that we're all on an even playing field and that there's not duplication or misrepresentation. So Census Day, April 1st, who is living in your home. And if there is any more additional clarification you may need, you can go onto the census website and look that up. So for example, if you're pregnant, that doesn't count. But if you did just have a baby, that would count. So we want to make sure that we kind of understand some of those nuances that exist with that Census Day data. Any other questions or comments from the group?
Yeah, when I went over the questions on the census, it did ask on that day too. So keep in mind that it is April 1st, 2020, even if you're filling it out in July, August, or even September.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you again to everyone that contributed today, all of our panelists. It was a pleasure to have all of you here. We're hopeful that this will generate some more Tracys in the world to promote us across our cities and encourage just our communities to participate. So thank you to the attendees that joined us as well. and stay tuned for this posting. And if you don't mind helping to share it with your friends and your family, that'd be greatly appreciated. And of course, watch for our challenge because I really want to win. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening and be safe.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, everyone.